evolution is not good or bad. Let me repeat that. Evolution is not good or bad. Evolution is amoral. Also, evolution is not necessarily the only path to be taken. You see, evolution is simply something used in a utilitarian fashion by life. Life needs to survive primarily, and to survive, it takes the road of evolution. Now, if life could survive without evolving, it would. And some forms of life, in fact, do not evolve. Because they do not need to evolve, there is no actual pressure from their environment. The accident, the genetic accident of their existence, was enough to make them survive in the current state of affairs. There are some mutations that are not facing as friendly circumstances as some others, and for those weaker pieces of the genome, there is the need for evolution. Now, there is always the chance that the genetic material of somebody, some organism, makes it enough with no changes to survive in a certain environment. Then again, this is also a very small chance. We can see that in cockroaches. I believe that cockroaches in the urban form and not in the wild form did not need too much effort to adapt. And in reality, all they needed to do was just stick to the societies of people and use the leftovers. The resilience of cockroaches is probably a trait that can be traced to the very genetic accident of their existence, and not necessarily the evolution. You see, evolution is not always the way things go on. It might just be a mutation. Mutation is not necessarily evolution, it might be a complete accident. Thus, we must not treat evolution as something that has a purpose, or something that has moral grounds or ethics involved, or any kind of metaphysical background. Evolution is what it is. It's a process, a model we use as human beings to understand a wider process of nature, to adapt its smaller elements with each other. Evolution is basically the procedure with which nature tweaks each organism to make it interact with the rest of the ecosystem correctly. Now, I am saying nature tweaks as if nature is a person, but nature, of course, is not a person. In reality, this is happening spontaneously. This tweaking is happening without any kind of guidance, at least in the academic sphere. We could say that there is a God, but this is another topic. Then again, the most important issue, the most important element of life itself is survival. It is not evolution itself. Life's purpose is not evolution, but survival. Now, I know some people who have read Nietzsche are going to say that there is the will to power. Well, yeah, there is the will to power, but the way it's manifested, and the reason power exists, the reason we need power is not power by itself. It's not a purpose. You can't want power by itself. It doesn't make any sense. Power is always the means to an end. Thus, will to power means that you need certain means to reach certain ends. Thus, will to power means that you want power to survive. Survival is the most important element of life, because in reality, there are only two things in life: life and death. Nothing in between, and all morality can be traced to basically death. So, what we need to do is to stop thinking as evolution in the sphere of the human species as something that has a purpose, or that's something that can be explained in a racialistic way easily, because that would in fact be making a theory before you have the evidence. And the only evidence we have is the need to live, the need to survive, and this is just it. If you can live without evolving, without natural selection, without all that, then you can do that. But there is a case that you need natural selection, that you need evolution to survive, and this is called the evolutionary pressure from the environment. So in the end of the day, we are in fact thinking that Africans are not advanced, and that this may be due to their genome. The reason I probably disagree is because they have different shit to deal with, and when you grow, the brain is like plastic. The brain can change in shape, and basically the upbringing is what makes the brain where it is. The upbringing, along with the months of pregnancy, are what affect the brain. The brain is affected by stress, by parental upbringing or parental abuse. It is affected by the way parents treat the child in all ways, like if the child is encouraged to think or not. It is not, it cannot be deduced solely to genetics, because genetics, in the end of the day, comes from the environment. So the idea that genetics is actually above anything is in fact creationist. It's in fact trying to say that there is some kind of original power that goes above the environment, when in fact it is the environment that brings the evolutionary pressures, which in turn cause the evolution. In all cases, there is no moral background in evolution. The word superior and inferior makes no sense when it comes to surviving, because when it comes to survival, all that matters is your survival. And if that makes you superior to the guy who's dead, well, yeah, you're superior. But let us not forget that there are also accidents involved. I mean, could you say that you're superior to a guy who was in a bus and got killed in an accident? Imagine that this guy was actually 10 times as smart as you are, or that he had 5 PhDs. Let's just make it, for the sake of argument, this preposterous. A guy having 5 PhDs and being extremely smart. Would you say that he's still inferior compared to you? This is the problem. The problem is that there are a lot of accidents involved, and the problem is that there are a lot of accidents in nature, and you can't say whether or not somebody can or can't adapt that easily. And adaptation is firstly something that has to do with accidents, and secondly, for adaptation to work, you need an accident to not be fatal, and you need it to happen on a regular basis so that you get used to it. It's basically a stress. It's basically what can cause depression. Anyway, so this is my central point. My central point is do not treat evolution as if it is a conscious process, as if it is a plan. It isn't a plan, and in fact, it's not even necessary. And in our world today, there is no evolution. I mean, we could say there is evolution, and the evolution happens probably in the third world, in the places that people like white nationalists tend to attack, like saying that they live in shit. Well, yeah, they do live in shitholes. This is a demonstrable fact. But the difference is that there are a lot of evolutionary pressures there, because there are a lot of accidents, there are a lot of deaths, all the diseases, all the possible, I don't know, animal attacks or anything, and of course the climate with its humidity and you know all the things that it includes, the insect, the poison, anything you might find there. It's basically evolutionary pressure. We do not receive evolutionary pressure when we live in a world where we have domesticated every animal we are dealing with. We're not having any evolutionary pressures when we are dealing with a world that is constantly more pleasing to the eye and more pleasing to the senses. Now, I am not saying we should return to a savage world, no. But I am saying we should stop thinking of evolution as necessarily good or necessarily evil. You see, perhaps it is just a process, and sometimes it might not be needed, it might be obsolete. And if anything, the argument that things have become better for Europeans, which of course can be traced back to the transfer of technology from the southern Europe to northern Europe, like for example from the Fertile Crescent, which is the Middle East, and India, and the Indus Valley, and of course ancient Greece and ancient Egypt to the north. It was much easier to transfer technology to the north compared to transferring to the south through the Sahara Desert. Let us not forget that the Sahara Desert is actually the biggest barrier on Earth. It is the biggest and most hard to traverse barrier on Earth. So saying that you can't say easily that these people live in shitholes because it's genetics. Well, actually, it was also hard to transfer technology, and the most friendly place to develop technology on an early civilization level is the Mediterranean. This is a demonstrable fact. And of course, to a second degree, friendly places to develop civilizations are valleys in which the climate is not bad. The Indus Valley is one example, probably, the Fertile Crescent, or the Yangtze Valley in China. So we can see that, in fact, it can be explained by just addressing the environment. But this is the big problem. If we are to start thinking about evolution, about all that, what makes us think that the people in Africa have not evolved and are not evolving right now. Perhaps technology is dysgenic, and perhaps the very fact that the West, the so-called West, was closer to technological progress was dysgenic compared to the people in Africa. Now, if you are accepting that there is enough time for evolution to happen, the time of separation, I tend to think it's not enough, really. I mean, in terms of the brain, mostly. But if you believe that, then you will also have to believe that there have been far greater pressures south of the Sahara Desert compared to Northern Europe. I know that's a hard thing to comprehend, but in Northern Europe, all you have to deal with basically is the climate. This is it. You have just to deal with the climate, and if you can deal with the climate, which means find a log of wood, find a cave, put the log of wood in a fire that you have made or that you have found accidentally by a thunder or something like that. That's all you need to do. And you can get a fur or something like that from an animal. The threats are not that great. I mean, you can find a lot of threats in the tropical climates that are severe compared to the mild threats in colder climates. And these mild threats, well, it's basically the climate. It's nothing else. And of course, the Africans have to deal with the diseases and dangerous insects, dangerous venomous animals. So it's not that easy to get to start saying that they lived in shit, they live in shit. So conclusion, their genetic material is shit. Well, it might be, and it might not be. And seeing that there are more evolutionary pressures over there, according to my assumptions. Now, of course, there is always the assumption about the winters and the cycle of winters in the north being a sufficient evolutionary pressure, but I tend to think otherwise. Because, in my opinion, and it's just an opinion, there is only the climate involved. You don't have to deal with extremely large beasts or diseases. And the diseases you have to deal with in the south are far more severe, especially because the climate allows them to be more severe. The worst thing that can happen in the north is getting a cold. The worst thing that can happen in the south is malaria, is all forms of, Ebola and all that shit. Plus, we all know that mosquitoes and all these pests find it much easier to survive in these climates. So all I wanted to say actually was that what I said in the previous 10 minutes, basically, that evolution has no purpose other than survival. Evolution is a process, and this process is not necessary. It happens due to necessity. It happens due to the necessity of surviving, but it's not necessary by itself. Evolution, as in power, as one Nietzschean would call it, is not necessary. The will to power, which can be translated to the will to evolve in terms of biology, is not really a will, but a necessity to survive. And if survival was certain, you would not need to evolve. Now, if you really believe that survival is certain in sub-Saharan Africa, I think you have no idea about what sub-Saharan Africa is really like. And yeah, it is very fertile for crops, but to get the technology to make these crops and to manage to survive all the shit involved in South Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, you need some kind of transfer of technology from north of the Sahara Desert, which is very hard. Now, basically, the Northern Europeans have had this advantage, the advantage of getting the technology easier from the Fertile Crescent, because it was just a matter of, the Greeks making a bunch of colonies around the Mediterranean, and then it was just a matter of time until technology would just go northwards. But let's just not simplify things by saying, by confusing meanings, like saying the is of the reality of sub-Saharan Africa, the savage reality there, can be equated to an ought, like they deserve this. To make the jump from this is what's happening to they deserve what's happening is a very bold move, and I'm not sure the people saying that have enough evidence to say that. Anyway, I have been going on for too long, and I think that concludes what I want to say. Thank you for listening.